Hello everyone. Right now, you're about to hear a short recap of the movie Bloodline. We see a nurse whose shift has just ended. She heads to the shower and puts her belongings into a locker. Everything seems completely normal, but the woman never gets to finish. An unknown attacker drives a knife into her neck and slashes her throat. After quickly burying the victim, the killer sneaks into a house at night and quietly approaches a sleeping woman. Evan Cole is a family man and a caring father. We go back in time 3 months earlier. Evan works as a school psychologist and often helps children who have suffered abuse. The problem is that nobody wants to open up to him. Some kids even tell Evan to get lost. Chris is different, though. He studies well and loves his mother. But he's afraid of going to college and leaving her alone. What if his father comes back and hurts her? At that time, Lauren still hadn't given birth yet. One night, she suddenly panics and shouts for her husband to get ready. Evan is present during the delivery. As he watches his son being born, the maniac remembers his previous victims. Evan's mother arrives at the hospital. Marie recalls that when Evan was born, he remained completely calm and didn't even cry. Lauren struggles with the baby's first feeding. Then that same nurse walks in to help, but instead she starts roughly twisting the infant's head. She even snaps at them when asked to stop. That night, Evan promises his child that he'll become the best father possible and protect him from everyone. Andrew causes his parents a lot of trouble. He constantly cries and refuses to breastfeed. Evan has completely forgotten what healthy sleep feels like, while Lauren seems to be on the verge of depression. Dark thoughts begin creeping into the maniac's mind. When Evan was a child, his father used to beat him badly. Thankfully, his mother tried to protect him and was ready to slice open her husband's stomach if he ever laid hands on the boy again. Things become easier for the young parents once Marie moves into the house. At work, Evan becomes distracted and inattentive. Chris, however, shows kindness by giving the psychologist's son a toy. The boy no longer wants to talk about his family. Apparently, his father has already been released from prison. Another boy named Ray finally starts talking too. His father has begun beating not only him, but also his younger brother. After Ray's visit, Evan studies the father's file. That night, he can't sleep. It's time to bring goodness and positivity into the world by getting rid of disgusting monsters. Luis has just been kicked out of the bar where he was drinking. The guy is struggling with his lighter, but luckily a stranger decides to help him. The kind man even offers to drive the drunk home. During the ride, the man starts ranting about immigrants, saying it's time to give this country back to white people. Evan notices a Nazi tattoo on the man's arm. He drives Luis home and even hands him another bottle of alcohol. The drunk finds shelter inside a large apartment complex. Evan knocks Luis out with a baton and ties him to a chair. When the man wakes up, he demands to be untied. Evan turns on a voice recorder and shows the bastard a photo of his son. So you enjoy beating a helpless child, your own flesh and blood. The maniac pulls out a knife and lightly stabs Luis with it. Every time, he asks his victims to confess and explain why they did the terrible things they did. After delivering his signature strike to the neck, the killer calmly watches Luis die slowly. Once the body is buried, he returns home to the warm bed beside his wife. Ray's life immediately improves after his tyrant father suddenly disappears. Evan also begins smiling more often, but his wife worries she'll become a bad mother. The baby refuses to eat, and that rude nurse filled her head with even more anxiety. Lauren doesn't want her mother-in-law sitting in front of the TV with the baby all day. Evan orders his mother to turn the television off. She obeys, then kisses her son directly on the lips. Ray's happiness soon turns into anxiety. Sure, his father is a monster, but he has never disappeared for this long before. Finally, Kelly opens up as well. Her uncle has been abusing her, but she refuses to go into details. Luckily for the teenagers, Evan has his own, effective, methods of helping them. He kidnaps Fred and demands to know how he could possibly do such things to his own 15-year-old niece. She wanted it herself. The abuser tries to justify himself. The redhead quickly loses his confidence after receiving the first stab wound to the stomach. Suddenly, the phone rings. Evan shoves the knife into Fred's mouth and answers the call. His wife is furious. The baby has a fever, so they're heading to the hospital. This time, Evan doesn't get the satisfaction he usually craves. The ritual has been interrupted. On top of that, he becomes sloppy because of the rush. He has to drive to the hospital with a corpse still lying in the trunk. There, the family once again runs into that unpleasant nurse. As they approach the car, Marie notices the plastic sheeting and quietly pulls her daughter-in-law aside before giving her son a disapproving look. Once everyone finally falls asleep at home, Evan is able to bury his latest victim. As usual, the maniac burns all the evidence in a barrel. Back inside the house, he picks up his son. Evan once again can't focus at work. He grows increasingly nervous and constantly listens to the dying confessions of his victims. His behavior starts seriously worrying his wife. That evening, a frightened Chris calls Evan. Earlier that day, he got into a fight with his father, and the man smashed his face badly. Lauren isn't happy about any of this. Maybe Evan should spend more time taking care of his own child instead of dealing with students outside of work. Chris skips the next meeting entirely. Over the phone, the boy says that he and his father have reconciled, and that the man promised to quit drugs. Evan's usual victim slips away from the hook, so he remembers that sweet nurse and heads to the hospital. Like a shadow, he follows the woman all the way to the shower room without being noticed even once. He waits for her to undress and turn on the water. And then we learn that the nurse was not Evan's victim that night after all. He actually managed to track down Chris's father. The drug addict sneaks into the hospital to steal pills, while the nurse is killed that same night by Marie. She operates exactly like her son, only her method of disposing of the body is different. Evan ties Mark to a chair. The man has absolutely no idea what's going on. He literally wets himself when the stranger asks him to talk about Chris. Mark realizes that the man standing before him is his son's psychologist. Chris talks about him all the time. Mark gets punched in the face and starts confessing. He blames everything on his addiction, which earns him another stab to the stomach. Mark says he wants his family back and begs for one more chance. Then, already bleeding from the wound in his stomach, he says he knows people like Evan. He saw monsters like him in prison. According to Mark, Evan will never become a good father or husband because he doesn't understand what love really is. Sooner or later, everyone will find out the truth, and what will he do then? This time, Evan does everything perfectly. It's exactly the same way his mother hid a body 25 years earlier, when little Evan killed his very first victim. That victim was his own father. That night, Marie praised her son and promised she would always protect him. Since then, their ritual has never changed. Today, Marie notices a drop of blood on Evan's neck. Now Lauren can't sleep either. Her husband constantly disappears somewhere. Is everything really okay between them? The next morning, Evan once again scolds his mother because of the television. Especially since the news is broadcasting a horrifying story. Several bodies have been discovered on the grounds of an abandoned complex. While Ray cries and blames himself for his father's death, Kelly doesn't even try to hide her smile after learning what happened to her uncle. Chris, however, is not happy at all. His father had started changing for the better. He could have recognized him. Before dying, Mark mentioned that his wife was supposed to receive an inheritance. And just moments ago, the psychologist accidentally let something slip about that money. How could he possibly know about it? The boy immediately becomes suspicious and quickly leaves the office. The next day, a detective shows up at the Cole family's house. On top of that, Evan works with all of these students, and he's only been employed there for a single year. Quite an interesting coincidence. As he leaves, the detective asks Lauren whether her husband ever disappears at night. Marie lies and says no. Lauren repeats the same lie. Luckily, the baby starts crying, giving the woman a chance to hide in the bedroom. Now, even Evan's kisses disgust her. The next time, the detective comes specifically to speak with Lauren. She has known her husband for a long time. At one point, Evan lived near a desert, and a year after he moved away, a similar burial site was discovered in that town. Lauren does everything she can to protect her husband. After exhausting workdays, he still had to put up with her and the constantly crying baby. And if he sometimes went out at night, it was only to get some fresh air. But he always came back home, and for that she is grateful. Once again, the detective leaves empty-handed. Lauren tells Evan about the conversation during dinner. The news reports on the nurse whose body was found on a gurney near the morgue. What a week this has been, the news anchor concludes. That night, a furious Chris breaks into the Evans family home. He's convinced that the psychologist murdered his father. The boy pulls out a gun and points it at Evan. But when Chris notices the woman holding a child, he lowers the weapon slightly, and Evan immediately takes advantage of the moment. He hugs the boy and presses the gun against his head, whispering that everything will be okay. But in the end, he sets the weapon aside. Lauren witnesses the entire scene with her own eyes. Later that night, Evan gets up to feed his son with a bottle. At the same time, he tells little Andrew that life sometimes corners a person so badly that no choices remain. Lauren listens to his monologue through the baby monitor. She waits until her husband falls asleep, then rushes to search through his belongings. Soon, she discovers discs containing the confessions of his victims. Lauren finally understands everything and bursts into tears. Inside the trash can, she also finds an article about the murdered men. Marie interrupts her terrifying thoughts. According to her, family is the most important thing in life and must be protected at all costs. It would be terrible if Andrew grew up without parents. After all, Lauren herself is an orphan. Surely she doesn't want the same fate for her son. Lauren calls her husband and asks him to stay with Andrew for a while. She claims she just wants to relax and do some shopping. Evan agrees, though he clearly senses that something is wrong. In reality, Lauren makes another phone call and asks someone for help. Evan hopes his wife won't turn him in. She needs her family. Meanwhile, Evan goes after Chris, because the boy has become his biggest problem, aside from Lauren. At the same time, Lauren also drives somewhere in her car. The husband and wife arrive at the very same place, the crime scene. But Lauren gets there slightly earlier. She arranged the meeting specifically with Chris. "Yes, it was my husband," Lauren says. Then she places a gun into the boy's hand and pulls the trigger herself. The murder happens right in front of Evan's eyes. Lauren leaves the weapon in Chris's hand and writes a suicide note from his Facebook account, claiming that he murdered all those men and buried them at that location. Later, the detective arrives at the Cole family home and announces that the case has officially been closed, although he himself clearly doesn't believe that version of events.